At Charity Charge, our mission is to power yours. Most banks and financial service providers weren't built for nonprofits. They don't understand your structure or how you operate. That's why we exist. We proudly serve more than 3,000 organizations across the U.S., offering tools built exclusively for the sector. From credit cards and expense management to bookkeeping and gift cards, every solution is designed to help you minimize operations and supercharge your impact. And we're more than just financial services. We're an educational community. We share resources every day on our podcast, blog, and webinars to help you stay informed, compliant, and empowered. Visit charitycharge.com to learn more and join the community. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Charity Charge Show. This is Grayson Harris, and today we are having the absolute pleasure to have Bennett Weiner, who is the new president and CEO as of early 2025 of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance, also known as give.org. Bennett, thank you so much for coming on today.
Happy to be here, Grayson. Really a pleasure.
Well, you picked an interesting time to step into this role within the organization. Can you tell me a little bit about how this last, 8 months has been, and also what the work is that y'all are doing with give.org?
Well, first, although I stepped in the CEO role in April of this year, I have been working within the organization for several decades. So this is not news to me. It fit like a glove to be able to step into more responsibility, and I know where everything is and how it works. And I was able to go to a smooth transitions from our former CEO, Art Taylor, who's now heading up the Association of Fundraising Professionals. So we're proud that he's gone to that organization. But in terms of what we do for those who are unfamiliar, the BBB Wise Giving Alliance has a legacy of reporting on charities really for about a century or more under various different names. And what our focus is evaluating charities in relation to a set of voluntary standards. And these standards address things like governance, finances, website disclosure, appeal accuracy, donor privacy, and other issues. And we identify charities to evaluate based on inquiries we receive from the general public mostly. And they let us know what charities that we should evaluate that they're soliciting from. And we'll approach the charity to send us information so we can do a review. And then more importantly, we work one-on-one with each charity individually with our staff to help them understand what standards we found that may not be meeting, what they can do to overcome that, and then finally post the report when we're done with that process so the public can see whether they meet or don't meet our standards. And a charity that meets all our 20 standards is called an accredited charity as a shorthand way of referring to that. Those that don't meet, we identify what standards they don't meet and explain the reason for it. Our approach on this is different because other monitors are rating charities based on letter grades or star grades or other means. That's not what we're about. We're a standard-setting organization, and it's just about encouraging charities to follow good practices and encourage them. And I think especially smaller organizations, we found over the years, benefited more from our evaluations than some of the larger ones because they're the ones that in some cases needed some extra help in order to get on the right track. And we're proud that we were part of strengthening their accountability, but also their management in being able to address so many issues they may not have thought about before. So that's a little overview of what we do and how we go about it. We're a little bit different than other monitors out there.
It's incredible. And, as you step into this role where it's more of a public-facing position, what has maybe surprised you about some of these conversations that you're having with members of the public in terms of what their perception of your organization is?
Well, I have found that the public needs to be educated about the philanthropic sector. Some of us in the sector assume they know more than they really do. And that's a lesson I think that continues to be learned by me, even in this new role. And I'll give you an example of that. We did a recent survey. We call it a donor trust report. And we surveyed about 1,500 Americans across the country, with balanced on gender, on race and income and things like that. And we found that only 32% of American adults over 18 who were surveyed were aware that the federal government had reduced their support for grants in 2025. That's amazing. Only a third. So 2/3 of them were completely unaware of that issue. So there's an example where, unfortunately, the uninformed public really needs to be helped. And charities that are soliciting now, who've been affected by these cuts, and many smaller organizations were, need to remind their donors and others that they were impacted. And please help us at this critical time You really can't assume that they know about it. The other thing that we found in terms of the generational differences is that the younger people were less informed about this issue. In fact, some of them feel that the government would even got them more money instead of less. And the older ones were more informed. And I think that may be a function of where they're getting their news. I think younger people are relying more on social media, TikTok or YouTube or whatever else they're using to find out what's happening during the day as opposed to more traditional sources. And that, I think, is creating that difference in understanding.
Thank you for that. And I think that's incredibly important as nonprofits look to create these communications during challenging times,
Right.
where they're both creating this sense of trust and the public with the being able to be good stewards of that funding, but then also educate them that there are real challenges that their organization is facing. On that note of trust, where do you see the role of the BBY's Giving Alliance in creating and building that trust and accountability between the nonprofit and the public space?
Well, it's evolving, and I think it's evolving because there are new challenges: artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, donor privacy. The list goes on. And while our current standards address some of those issues, they don't fully. So we're in the process right now. We've been working with an advisory body of 20 individuals. Most of them come from charitable organizations that are in the CEO positions of those organizations, and they're advising us on how we're going to revise our standards and modernize them, but also make them less burdensome to the charitable community. Our intention is to have a revision, a draft available in early 2026 for the charitable sector itself to react to, as well as the public and others. That's an important part of what we do. It's due process. We're not the ones that are going to create the standards and ask people to follow it. We work with the charitable sector to help create these standards, and then we finalize them and encourage people to meet them. So that due process is important, not only in the creation of the reports, but in the creation of the standards. But the other thing I said about the word evolving is that this is not going to be a one-time thing anymore. We're going to have to look at our standards every year. Is there something we need to change? Is there some new thing that the sector has to deal with? And I think as technology continues to evolve almost logarithmically, we have to be ready to pivot as necessary for those changes because the world is going to change very quickly. I heard the Institute for the Future, they come out with these 10-year predictions. They said that within 10 years, there are going to be more bots in existence in the world than humans. So more of these AI bots around, and they're all going to be specialized doing different things. But that's an incredible thought in terms of how many of these things are going to be operating and we're going to be working with, and who knows what else is going to be happening. That's a lot of change, a lot of difference from the way things are working now, and we have to be prepared for that. And we hope to be part of that as a solution rather than creating any more problems that the sector already has.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And you mentioned this aspect of being a part of the solution. And what stands out to me and your approach to that is where you actually walk hand in hand with the organizations through this accreditation process. And it's something you touched on
That's right.
briefly. Can you tell me a little bit more about, maybe some, as the sector is evolving right now, some maybe
Right.
common pain points and challenges that organizations are facing that maybe you're seeing within your role?
Well, there are two areas I think that charities would benefit from, especially smaller organizations. One is ensuring that they have a good governance procedures in place. Any organization, despite their size, the buck stops with the board. They're the ones that are really in control, not the CEO. Sometimes that's not fully understood, but that's the way it works. So if they have a really good and active board involved, they're more likely to be able to manage and also make changes and do things when issues come up. So what are some of the touch points in that? Are they showing up to meetings? At least 50% of them showing up over the course of the year. Do you have enough meetings with the board in order to have good governance? We recommend 3. Some organizations have less than that or more than that, but 3 is the minimum. And then attendance, if they're on the board, they should show up. And are they reviewing the right stuff? In other words, they're getting the financial documents, they're getting the budgets, they're getting the 990 before it's filed, and they're appropriately informed of the activities of the organization so they can take measures if the organization is off track. So good governance is really key, and that's where some organizations unfortunately falter. The other thing I would say that comes up is that financial management. Having a good financial statement is not just an exercise in bureaucratic compliance. It really is something that helps you manage your day-to-day operations. Simple things like a functional breakdown of expenses, how much is being directed to your programs versus admin costs versus fundraising. You should be able to identify that even if you're a small organization, so you can manage to make sure that your money is going to where it should be over the course of the year. And if you're not doing that, you may be ending up with a surprise later on when your statements are put together. And gee, I didn't realize I was spending so much money on that. The time to think about that is as you're spending it over the course of the year, not just when your financial statement is ready. And again, these things are common sense things. They're not complicated or expensive things to do. It's just a common sense approach to governance as well as finances and the other areas that I have. And I would say the third thing is charities need to make sure that their messaging is accurate. You'd be surprised, people operate in silos. Jane's taking care of our social media and our media content. Okay, is anyone reviewing what she's doing and making sure that it's saying the right thing in the right way? Maybe not. And you have to have that type of exchange in a friendly way, but in order to ensure that you're doing the right thing. And some organizations, I know, we have so many hats on that we're doing. I mean, I've got a lot of hats, even as CEO, and we're busy. We just say, hey, I only have a handful to be able to address this stuff. That's right. But if you prioritize things that are important, you can avoid problems. Too often, people finally take measures after a problem occurs. That's a little bit late. It's a good lesson learned, but the hope is that you can avoid that by engaging good practices before that happens. And that's what we hope our standards are going to provide.
There were incredible gems that came out of those three responses that you had. One of the ones that really stood out to me, it's almost in terms of that financial side, add data in is not going to allow and equip the board to make educated and informed decisions in real time. It's going to be this kind of reactive response, as you talked about in this third point. Whenever you're having these conversations with an organization and maybe they're not checking all the boxes, we can start maybe on the board side. What is
Right.
the first step that you outline for them in terms of this is what has to be done to get to that, that three a year, that minimum standard that y'all expect out of a nonprofit organization?
I think just a recognition of where the deficiencies are, by exchanging those points. I mean, that's the first step, the acknowledgement that there is an issue. How to address it, I would say, would depend on the nature of the beast. So,
Of
for
course.
example, if an issue is that you've got only 2 meetings a year, you really should have 3 or maybe even 5 would be more ideal for you. You have to plan that out. You have to work with the board, identify dates. That's a possibility, but it's doable if you have exchanges and you come to agreement as to what's practical. If, on the other hand, your governance problem is you've got a related party transaction with a member of the board who is providing all your IT services and, you're in a contract with them and then wait a minute, uh, is that really in your best interest to have a board member who is serving you on something you're using on a daily basis? What if a problem comes up? How easy is it going to be to say, we're going to drop our contract with you, board member, and go with someone else? No one's going to want to do that. This is where related party transactions can come into a conflict of interest. The board has to be essentially financially disinterested in the organization. They should be mission focused. And that's why boards in general, good boards, they don't have transactions with board member related firms. And they keep the number of compensated people on the board down to a minimum, maybe the CEO, but generally no more than that. We hope that it won't be more than 10% of the full voting membership. So, I mean, but those issues of who's on the board and if there's a transaction, that's more sensitive. And that's going to be more of a challenge to try to do something about because there is an issue. And I know why organizations get into these types of messes is because of, well, we're going to get a good rate because it's a board member firm and they're giving us a discount. So let's hire them. And, what if they don't do a good job? Just because they're a board member, they may not be providing the best service to you. It may not be in your best interest. And so there are all types of problems. People don't see it because everyone assumes everyone is operating in the best interest of charity. And I think that's essentially true. But problems happen. Organizations that have difficulties in getting out of it.
It's a misaligned incentive.
Correct.
Thank you for sharing that. On the finances note, what as you walk, with organizations maybe who are just, really reviewing it that once a year when they're filing their 990, what's that first step in terms of getting that regular review going?
Then I would say you need to schedule that to ensure that one, you have someone on the board of directors that is serving in the role of treasurer. And you want that to be an unpaid person, not who your accountant or CFO is. It has to be a voting board member who has the responsibility of financial oversight, and they should be getting the finances on a periodic basis. At a minimum, every board meeting should have, as part of it, a review of how are you operating your expenses and related to what you've budgeted, and to show the variances and identify the differences. Well, we had to spend more because two of our laptops crashed. We had to buy two more, and this is where we got this. The board needs to be informed again of significant variances from what you're budgeting, and that's really one of the best ways to help manage your finances. It's really at each stage of your oversight activity, you're incorporating a financial component to it. And every board meeting should have that as part of its review. If not, they're not doing their full fiduciary responsibility as a board member. And another thing I'll point out that some organizations struggle with is this. I know that there are many nonprofits in America today that start in someone's kitchen. Someone is passionate about a project. Says, I'm going to do this. And they get some friends and others who are also going along, and they start up an organization. And that's great. That's how many of these charities really get started. But at some point in time, that organization needs to be governed objectively and managed objectively. And there are some organizations face what I would call founder syndrome, where you have someone who's the founder and he's been there 15 years and he's serving as, or she, as both the CEO and the chair of the board, or some other thing that really restricts how much true oversight is taking place. That's an issue. And the more organizations are aware of those potential problems, the more they can deal with addressing them appropriately. I mean, we've all seen organizations that have gone into that spot. And again, it's not because someone doesn't care about the charity. They care a lot, a lot. It's almost like their child. But
Exactly.
at some point, your child becomes an adult, and you gotta
And that
have
transition can be
some
messy.
objectivity and transition.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And, something that you spoke to a little bit as well is how nonprofits communicate with their donors, with their audience, with the members. And I know that you have some specific thoughts around how AI is maybe being not used to its full capacity, oftentimes due to that lack of communication not coming through. Can you speak a little bit more to that, and also to how y'all have implemented AI within y'all's organization with Ask Give?
I mean, we're all using AI currently, whether we know it or not, whether it's for accounting software or other things. There's stuff that we're doing that's really part of this whole field, so to speak. But I think what you're really talking about is generative AI. In other words, an AI function that is responsive to outsiders or others, or maybe you're using AI to create copy for you, to help you along those lines. And I would say that the one helpful thing organizations can do is create a policy that identifies how your organization is going to deal with AI in terms of, is there someone assigned to the oversight over the use of this activity? And if we use AI to create things, is there someone going to verify the accuracy of it before it's posted and before it's used? Things like that. So there's a chain of authority, even if you have a small organization, about how something's to be used. And don't assume, if we're using AI, that everything's going to be perfect and is going to say the right thing. It may not. And unless you have someone who is checking or responsible for that oversight, there's going to be less of a chance that you're going to catch those problems before they emerge. So I'd say a policy, and also ensuring correct oversight and making sure that someone is reviewing the accuracy of these things before they're posted.
Love that. And what are your thoughts in terms of ensuring that the audience that is maybe, if for example, if you're developing a chat bot like Ask Give, how do you ensure that the audience is able to communicate in an effective way?
I think that generally it's the key to that is working with your developer in the language that you're going to be incorporating, because the AI tool, you can tell them, what grade level or what type of assumption of education you have for people and what answers are coming out. And the more instructions you give, the better result you're going to have. So Don't assume everything in setting this up is going to be automated and just click a switch. You've got to put some work into it to make it work right. And there are a lot of AI firms out there. And for example, we've been working with one known as Zigment, and they're offering some reduced rate services to nonprofits that organizations may want to consider doing. So, I mean, there are a lot of AI possibilities out there, and look before you leap on that. And if you like what some of your other friend organizations are doing, ask them what their experience is and who they work with. That may be a key. The other thing I would say, there's enough opportunity out there. You can find reasonably priced firms. You don't have to pay tremendous amounts of money to do this. There's some very low cost possibilities that can be considered.
Incredible. Well, as we come to the end of 2025, where it's time of reflection and also planning for the future, what does 2026 look like for the BBB Wise Giving Alliance, and what's got you excited?
I mean, for us, it's going to be, I think, the revision of our standards that I've been talking about
Yeah.
and getting input from the charitable community to make sure that they agree with what we're is being proposed and we get their input, and then sending out those messages about what those revised standards are. I think that's probably one of the most important things that we're going to get done this year. The other thing is making further improvements on our own chat function, our own Ask Give. We want to include more data and things in that function so that it can be even more helpful to donors when they visit our website.
How can our audience of nonprofits get involved and make sure that that feedback is contributed as y'all develop these new standards?
Visit our website at give.org. We're certainly going to communicate with the charity trade press and others and make announcements and look for mentions of us and our revised standards in the coming year. But just come to our website, and when our standards are available for comment, they'll be up there for several months for organizations to respond to.
Amazing. Well, Bennett, thank you so much for coming on and sharing more about the work of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance. It's an incredible service that is there for both the public and the nonprofits themselves as y'all, work hand in hand to ensure that they're, running in an effective, efficient, and a trustworthy way.
Thank you, Grace, and I'm glad to be part of this program. I appreciate it.